The morning alarm echoed through the massive corridors of Station Harmony, home to the most prestigious military academy in the galaxy. Thousands of cadets from dozens of worlds rushed to their morning formations, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that would have amazed any single-world observer. Alex Reed pulled on his standard-issue uniform and checked his appearance in the mirror one last time. The reflection showed a young man of average height with brown hair and calm green eyes. Nothing about him screamed dangerous or special, which was exactly how he preferred it. Back home on New Montana, he had been just another farm kid with good grades and a dream of seeing the stars. Here at the academy, he was something much more complicated. The dining hall buzzed with conversations in a dozen different languages as Alex made his way to the food dispensers. He nodded politely to a group of tall, graceful Altarians who barely acknowledged his presence. Their pale blue skin seemed to glow under the artificial lighting, and their large eyes held the kind of intelligence that made them natural leaders throughout the galaxy. Most of the Academy's top positions were filled by their kind, and everyone accepted this as natural order. At a nearby table, several Centauri cadets worked on tactical problems while eating their breakfast. Their forearms allowed them to manipulate multiple data tablets simultaneously, while their enlarged craniums housed the kind of processing power that made them invaluable strategic planners. They spoke in quick, efficient bursts, solving complex scenarios that would take other species hours to work through. The Rigelians dominated the far corner of the hall, their massive frames requiring specially reinforced furniture. These 7-foot giants with rocky, gray skin were the backbone of most military operations, serving as shock troops and heavy assault specialists. Their deep voices carried across the room as they discussed combat techniques and physical training routines. Alex found a quiet spot near the viewing ports and began eating his breakfast while watching the stars slowly wheel by outside. Station Harmony orbited a small moon in neutral space, chosen specifically because it belonged to no single species or government. The Academy represented the best hope for peaceful cooperation between the various galactic civilizations, and every cadet here was supposed to be working toward that goal. The reality was more complicated. While the different species worked together professionally, social groups formed along predictable lines. Altarians socialized with other Altarians, Centauri stuck with their own kind, and so forth. Humans, being one of the newest species to join the galactic community, often found themselves alone. Not that Alex minded being alone. He had always been more comfortable with books than crowds, more interested in learning than socializing. His instructors seemed pleased with his progress in tactical studies and combat training, though they sometimes looked at him with an expression he could not quite identify. It might have been concern, or perhaps caution. The truth was that humans made most other species nervous. Earth was classified as a Class 12 deathworld, meaning it was one of the most dangerous planets known to harbor intelligent life. Humans had evolved under conditions that would kill most galactic citizens within hours. High gravity, violent weather, aggressive predators, and constant environmental threats had shaped humanity into something unique among the stars. Other species whispered about human reflexes, human endurance, and human adaptability. They told stories about human soldiers who kept fighting with injuries that would disable anyone else, about human explorers who survived on worlds that should have been impossible to inhabit. The stories were not always flattering. Humans were also known for their unpredictability and their tendency toward violence when cornered. Alex had heard these whispers and had made a conscious decision to prove them wrong about human nature. He spoke quietly, moved carefully, and never lost his temper. When other cadets made comments about his species or their reputation, he smiled politely and changed the subject. When training exercises became heated, he stayed calm and focused. He wanted to show that humans could be just as civilized as anyone else. This approach had earned him a certain amount of respect from his instructors, but it had also made him a target for a different kind of attention. There were always those who mistook kindness for weakness, who saw restraint as an invitation to test boundaries. Alex had noticed the looks from certain groups of cadets, the way conversation stopped when he walked by, the small incidents that might or might not have been accidents. The morning briefing began at exactly 800 hours, with Commandant Ilarius, addressing the assembled cadets from the main stage. The elderly Altarian had served with distinction in 3 different galactic conflicts and commanded respect from every species in the Academy. His words carried weight because he had earned the right to speak them. Today's announcement was about the upcoming field exercises that would test everything the cadets had learned over the past semester. Teams would be assigned randomly, and success would depend on how well different species could work together under pressure. It was exactly the kind of challenge that the Academy was designed to provide, and exactly the kind of situation where tensions might boil over. Alex listened carefully and took notes, already thinking about optimal strategies for mixed species teams. He knew his human reflexes and endurance would be assets in the field, but only if his teammates trusted him enough to follow his lead when the situation demanded it. Building that trust would require patience and consistent performance. As the briefing concluded and cadets began filing out to their first classes, Alex caught sight of a group watching him from across the hall. 7 cadets from various species, all looking in his direction with expressions that made his instincts prickle with warning. He recognized most of them from combat classes and tactical exercises. They were skilled, confident, and had formed the kind of tight group that often caused problems for outsiders. Alex gathered his materials and headed for his first class, making a mental note to be extra careful around that particular group. He had no interest in conflicts or confrontations, but his human instincts were warning him that trouble might be coming whether he wanted it or not. For now, he would continue being polite, studious, and peaceful. It was what he believed in, and it was what he hoped would prove that humans deserved their place among the stars. The corridors of Station Harmony stretched out before him, filled with the promise of another day of learning and the shadow of challenges yet to come. The training simulation ended with Alex flat on his back, staring up at the holographic ceiling of Combat Room 7. His opponent, a Rigelian named Thane, stood over him with what might have been a smile on his rocky features. The impact had been harder than necessary for a training exercise, but Alex simply accepted Thane's offered hand and pulled himself to his feet. Thane was everything a Rigelian warrior should be. 7 feet tall, built like a granite statue, with the kind of natural armor plating that made his species famous as heavy assault troops. His small eyes held a calculating intelligence that suggested he was more than just muscle. Around the training room, his friends watched the interaction with obvious interest. Alex had been noticing Thane's group more and more over the past few weeks. They moved together like a pack, supporting each other in classes and exercises while making life difficult for cadets they considered weak or unworthy. The group included Crix and Vox, twin Altarians who used their natural telepathic connection to coordinate psychological attacks on their targets. There was also Doom, a massive Tau Sidian whose idea of humor involved causing physical pain to smaller species. The Centauri members were Rays and Flux, both tactical students who seemed to treat bullying as just another kind of strategic exercise. They would study their targets carefully, looking for weaknesses and vulnerabilities to exploit. The final member was Nord, a Vegan engineer whose quiet demeanor hid a talent for sabotage and cruel practical jokes. Together, they had made themselves the unofficial rulers of their class year, using a combination of physical intimidation and social manipulation to maintain their position. Most cadets learned quickly to stay out of their way and avoid attracting their attention. Alex had been trying to do exactly that, but his efforts seemed to have had the opposite effect. The incidents had started small. A bump in the corridor that sent his data tablet scattering, training equipment that had been subtly damaged before he used it, comments about human intelligence or human cowardice that were just loud enough for him to hear, but quiet enough to avoid official notice. Each time, Alex had simply cleaned up the mess, replaced the equipment, or ignored the comments. His instructors began to notice the pattern, though they could never quite catch anyone in the act. Sergeant Major Torres, a grizzled human veteran who taught advanced combat techniques, pulled Alex aside after one particularly obvious incident. The training equipment malfunction could have seriously injured Alex if his reflexes had been slower. Torres examined the damaged gear with the eye of someone who had seen sabotage before, but the alterations were subtle and could have been explained as normal wear and tear. Torres suggested that Alex report the harassment, but Alex declined. He believed that handling the situation officially would only make things worse, and he was not willing to admit that he could not deal with a few bullies on his own. Besides, he reasoned, this was probably just a test of his character and determination. Every species had their own ways of establishing hierarchy, and humans were still new enough to the galactic community that they needed to prove themselves. What Alex did not realize was that his restraint was being interpreted very differently by his tormentors. In Rigelian culture, failure to respond to a challenge was seen as admission of weakness. The Altarian twins viewed his lack of retaliation as evidence that humans were mentally deficient. Doom simply enjoyed having a target who would not fight back, while the Centauri pair saw his behavior as confirmation that humans had been admitted to the Academy through political favoritism rather than merit. The harassment escalated gradually, but steadily. Alex found his personal belongings moved or damaged on a regular basis. His academic assignments were mysteriously deleted from computer systems, forcing him to redo work at the last minute. During physical training sessions, he found himself facing opponents who seemed determined to cause injury rather than simply win the exercise. Through it all, Alex maintained his calm demeanor. He completed extra work without complaining, repaired or replaced his belongings without making a fuss, and treated his tormentors with the same polite respect he showed everyone else. He told himself that this was the right approach, that eventually they would lose interest and move on to easier targets. The turning point came when the group began targeting Alex's few friends among the other cadets. Pip, a small Arcturian who struggled with the physical demands of military training, found himself facing increasingly dangerous opponents in combat exercises. Beth, a quiet vegan who helped Alex with engineering coursework, discovered that her projects were being sabotaged just like his. When Tom, a fellow human who looked up to Alex as a role model, ended up in the medical bay after a training accident that bore all the hallmarks of deliberate sabotage, Alex realized that his policy of non-confrontation was not protecting anyone. It was simply enabling the bullies to expand their campaign of intimidation. The final straw came during a group study session in the Academy library. Alex was helping several younger cadets with tactical theory when Thane's group arrived and claimed the study room for themselves. The librarian, an elderly Altarian who preferred to avoid conflicts, suggested that the students could share the space. What followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The 7 bullies did not directly threaten anyone or break any specific rules. Instead, they made the study session impossible through a combination of loud conversations, deliberate disruptions, and subtle physical intimidation. One by one, the younger cadets made excuses and left until only Alex remained. Thane leaned back in his chair and smiled that granite smile. His message was clear without being spoken. Alex could continue to play the part of the peaceful human, but his friends would pay the price for his weakness. The bullies had found his weak spot, and they intended to exploit it ruthlessly. That night, Alex lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling and thinking about his options. He had tried to be the kind of human who proved that his species could be civilized and restrained. He had wanted to show that Earth's reputation for violence was just primitive history that humanity had outgrown. But his desire to be better than human stereotypes had allowed others to suffer. Alex thought about his instructors back home who had prepared him for the academy. They had taught him that true strength was not about the ability to hurt others, but about the wisdom to know when violence was necessary and when it was not. They had also taught him that sometimes the only way to stop a bully was to show them that their target was not as helpless as they believed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new choices. Alex was beginning to understand that sometimes the most peaceful action was to end a conflict quickly and decisively. The question was whether he was ready to show these particular bullies exactly what a human from a Class 12 Deathworld was capable of when pushed too far. The answer to that question would come sooner than he expected. The message appeared on Alex's personal tablet just as he finished his evening meal. It was simple and direct, with no signature or identifying information. Maintenance Bay 7, Level 15, 2100 hours. The sender was obvious, and the intention was clear. After weeks of escalating harassment, Thane and his group were ready for a final confrontation. Alex stared at the message for a long moment, weighing his options. He could report it to security, but proving anything would be difficult without evidence of actual threats. He could ignore it entirely, but that would likely lead to his friends facing even worse treatment. Or he could go to the meeting and try one last time to resolve the situation peacefully. The choice, when it came down to it, was not really a choice at all. Alex had been raised to protect those who could not protect themselves, and his tormentors had made it clear that they would continue targeting innocent cadets until someone stopped them. If that someone had to be him, then so be it. Alex spent the next few hours in his quarters, going through the mental exercises his instructors back home had taught him. Not combat techniques, but the kind of mental preparation that separated trained soldiers from street fighters. He reminded himself of the rules of engagement, the importance of proportional response, and the legal requirements for self-defense under galactic law. Most importantly, he prepared himself mentally for what might be necessary. Alex had never seriously hurt another sentient being, but he had trained for it extensively. His instructors had made sure he understood both the techniques and the responsibility that came with them. Tonight, that training might be put to the test. Maintenance Bay 7 was located in one of the older sections of Station Harmony, where the corridors were narrower and the lighting was dimmer. It was used primarily for storage and minor repairs, which meant it saw very little traffic during evening hours. Alex understood why the meeting location had been chosen. Whatever happened there would happen without witnesses. Alex arrived a few minutes before the appointed time and found the bay empty. He used the opportunity to survey the space, noting potential obstacles, escape routes, and anything that might be used as a weapon. The bay was cluttered with spare parts, tool racks, and maintenance equipment, all of which could become factors in a confrontation. The 7 bullies arrived precisely on time, moving with the coordination that came from weeks of working together. Thane led the group, his massive frame filling the doorway as he entered. Behind him came the others, spreading out in a practiced formation that blocked both exits and gave them optimal positioning for whatever they had planned. Alex remained where he was, hands visible and relaxed at his sides. He had positioned himself near the center of the bay, with clear lines of movement in all directions. To an observer, he might have seemed calm and unprepared. In reality, every muscle in his body was ready to explode into action at the first sign of genuine threat. Thane stepped forward, his rocky features set in an expression of grim satisfaction. For weeks he had been building toward this moment, and now he finally had the human exactly where he wanted him. No instructors, no witnesses, no rules except the ones he chose to enforce. The Rigelian's voice carried the kind of authority that came from knowing you held all the advantages. He spoke about human weakness, about political favoritism, and about the need to teach lessons to those who did not know their proper place in the galactic order. His words were carefully chosen to avoid direct threats while making his intentions perfectly clear. Alex listened without interrupting, his green eyes tracking each speaker as the others added their own comments. The Altarian twins spoke about mental deficiency and the need for superior species to guide their lessers. Doom made references to physical correction and attitude adjustment. The Centauri pair discussed strategic necessity and acceptable casualties. Throughout the verbal assault, Alex remained silent and apparently calm. He made no threats, issued no challenges, and showed no signs of anger or fear. This reaction seemed to frustrate his tormentors, who had expected at least some display of emotion. They interpreted his stillness as either cowardice or stupidity, not recognizing it as the focused calm of a predator preparing to strike. When the talking finally ended, Thane delivered what he clearly intended to be the final humiliation. He spoke about human pretensions to military service, about the need to clean up the Academy's admission standards, and about sending a message that would convince other humans to withdraw voluntarily. His words were accompanied by slow, deliberate steps forward, each one designed to emphasize his physical dominance. Alex tried one final time to de-escalate the situation. His voice was quiet but clear, offering to leave the bay and forget the entire incident. He suggested that they all return to their quarters and focus on their studies. He even offered to put in for a transfer to a different unit if that would resolve their concerns about human participation in the academy. The response was immediate and decisive. Thane's laughter boomed through the maintenance bay, followed by similar sounds from his companions. To them, Alex's offer confirmed everything they had believed about human weakness. Here was a member of the supposedly dangerous Deathworld species, back down and offering to run away at the first sign of real confrontation. Thane made his decision with the confidence of someone who had never encountered genuine opposition. He would deliver a beating that would serve as both punishment and warning. The human would be hurt badly enough to require medical attention but not permanently damaged. It would be a lesson in reality, a reminder of where humans actually stood in the galactic hierarchy. The Rigelian charged forward with all the unstoppable momentum of his massive frame, fully expecting to tackle Alex to the ground and begin the systematic beating that would end this confrontation. His teammates moved to support him, closing off escape routes and preparing to join the assault once their leader had established dominance. What none of them understood was that they were not facing a frightened academy cadet, or even an ordinary human. They were confronting a product of one of the most dangerous worlds in the known galaxy, a member of a species that had evolved under conditions that would kill most galactic citizens within hours. More than that, they were attacking someone who had been specifically trained to handle exactly this kind of situation. Alex's instructors back home had prepared him for many things, but most importantly, they had taught him to recognize the moment when violence became inevitable. That moment had arrived, and with it came the full awakening of reflexes and abilities that he had kept carefully hidden throughout his time at the academy. The farm boy from New Montana disappeared, replaced by something that belonged on a Class 12 Deathworld. Alex's green eyes went cold and focused as his body shifted into combat stance. Every sense sharpened to predator-level intensity, and his mind began calculating angles, timing, and force requirements with mechanical precision. Thane's charge suddenly looked slow and clumsy rather than overwhelming. The positioning of his teammates shifted from tactical advantage to predictable vulnerability. What had seemed like hopeless odds moments before now looked like a manageable problem with a clear solution. 7 seconds. That was how long Alex calculated it would take to end this confrontation decisively and permanently. 7 seconds to show these bullies exactly what they had been tormenting for the past few weeks. 7 seconds to demonstrate why humans were recruited as elite soldiers, despite being one of the newest species in the galactic community. The timer in Alex's head began counting down as Thane's massive form closed the final few feet between them. Everything that happened next would unfold with the brutal efficiency that only came from the perfect marriage of training, instinct, and necessity. Time seemed to slow as Thane launched himself forward, his 7-foot frame moving with what he thought was overwhelming speed and power. In his mind, the next few seconds were already decided. The human would go down under his initial rush, and then the real lesson would begin. What Thane could not have known was that he was not facing an ordinary academy cadet. He was attacking a human who had grown up on a world where everything was designed to kill you. The first second began with Thane's confident charge, his massive arms spread wide to grab and tackle his target. Alex waited until the last possible moment, until the Rigelian was fully committed to his attack with no chance to change direction. Then he moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent years dodging the aggressive wildlife of New Montana. Alex sidestepped with minimal movement, letting Thane's momentum carry him past while simultaneously driving his elbow upward into the Rigelian's solar plexus. The strike was precise and devastating, targeting the one spot where even Thane's natural armor offered no protection. The impact drove every molecule of air from the bully's lungs and sent shockwaves through his nervous system. Thane's eyes went wide with shock and pain as his body began shutting down from the respiratory trauma. His legs gave out beneath him as his brain desperately tried to restart his breathing. What should have been a triumphant tackle turned into an uncontrolled fall toward the maintenance bay floor. Alex was already moving to the second phase of his counterattack before Thane had even begun to fall. The human grabbed the Rigelian's shoulder and used the larger being's momentum to redirect his falling body toward Doom, who had been moving up to provide backup for what should have been an easy takedown. The collision between 7 feet of falling Rigelian and 6.5 feet of advancing Tau Cetian produced a sound like boulders crashing together. Doom had no time to react before Thane's armored form slammed into him with bone-crushing force. Both bullies went down in a tangle of limbs, their heads striking the bulkhead with impacts that echoed through the maintenance bay. The Altarian twins had been moving to flank Alex from both sides, confident that their telepathic coordination would allow them to attack simultaneously and overwhelm their target. What they had not counted on was facing someone whose reflexes operated at a completely different level than anything they had encountered before. Alex dropped low as both twins reached him, sweeping his leg in a wide arc that caught both Altarians across their ankles. Their natural grace and balance meant nothing when their feet were suddenly removed from beneath them. Crix and Vox found themselves airborne for a brief moment before crashing to the deck in an undignified heap. The impact drove the wind from both twins, but Alex was not finished with them yet. As they fell, he was already rising from his crouch, timing his movement to intersect with Crix's descending form. The human's elbow met the Altarian's temple with surgical precision, delivering just enough force to induce immediate unconsciousness, without permanent damage. Vox, still conscious but stunned from his fall, tried to roll away from the human who had just disabled his telepathic partner. The loss of that mental connection left him disoriented and confused, unable to process the speed at which the situation was deteriorating. He scrambled backward on his hands and knees, looking for an escape route that no longer existed. Reyes had been hanging back, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As a Centauri tactical student, he prided himself on his ability to analyze situations and exploit weaknesses, but everything he was seeing violated his understanding of how combat was supposed to work. Individual beings were not supposed to be able to move this fast or strike this precisely. The Centauri launched himself forward in what should have been a textbook tackle, using all 4 of his arms to ensure a successful grapple. His tactical training told him that once he got hold of the human, his superior strength and additional limbs would allow him to control the fight. The flaw in his reasoning was that he never got the chance to test his theory. Alex pivoted smoothly as Reyes approached, using the Centauri's own momentum against him in a move that would have impressed his martial arts instructors back home. Instead of trying to stop or redirect the attack, Alex enhanced it, grabbing Reyes' leading arm and accelerating his forward motion toward the nearest obstacle. The tool rack that Reyes' face encountered had been designed to hold heavy maintenance equipment. It was built from solid metal and anchored firmly to the bulkhead. When the Centauri's head struck it at high velocity, the rack barely vibrated, while Reyes' consciousness departed entirely. He slid to the floor and lay still, his tactical analysis capabilities temporarily offline. Flux and Nord, the remaining 2 members of the group, suddenly found themselves in a situation they had never prepared for. All of their planning had assumed that 7 against 1 meant automatic victory. They had expected to participate in a beating, not a desperate fight for survival against something that moved like liquid lightning. Both cadets turned to flee at the same instant, their coordination born of panic rather than planning. They had seen enough to understand that this was not a fight they could win, and their only hope was to reach the corridor and summon help. Unfortunately for them, Alex had already calculated their likely reactions and positioned himself to intercept. The human moved with frightening speed, covering the distance to the fleeing bullies in a fraction of the time it should have taken. His combat instructors had taught him that the key to ending fights quickly was to prevent enemies from regrouping or calling for reinforcements. That meant making sure no one left the engagement area until the situation was fully resolved. Alex reached both cadets just as they approached the exit. His hands shot out in a double palm strike that caught Flux and Nord simultaneously in their center of mass, driving them backward with irresistible force. Neither had time to brace for impact before they struck the bulkhead with enough force to rattle their teeth and scramble their senses. The sound of their impact marked the end of the 7 seconds that had begun with such confidence from the bullies. The maintenance bay fell silent except for the groaning of the injured and the sound of Alex's controlled breathing. 7 beings who had entered the bay as predators were now scattered across the floor in various states of consciousness and injury. Alex stood in the center of the chaos, his green eyes scanning each fallen form to assess threat levels and injury status. His training kicked in automatically, evaluating vital signs and determining who needed immediate medical attention. The farm boy from New Montana was gone, replaced by someone who belonged on the kind of world that produced the galaxy's most feared warriors. The transformation had been complete and devastating, but it was also temporary. As the immediate threat passed, Alex felt his combat reflexes beginning to stand down. His heart rate slowed, his breathing deepened, and his hyperacute senses began returning to normal levels. The predator was fading back into the quiet cadet, who just wanted to study and prove that humans belonged among the stars. But the damage was done, and not just to the 7 bullies who were scattered around the maintenance bay. In 7 seconds, Alex had demonstrated exactly why Earth was classified as a Class 12 deathworld, and why its inhabitants were both feared and recruited throughout the galaxy. The question now was what would happen when the rest of the Academy learned what a human was truly capable of when pushed beyond his limits. The first responders arrived at Maintenance Base 7 within 3 minutes of the automatic sensors detecting multiple impact signatures consistent with combat trauma. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about Academy discipline and human capabilities. 7 cadets lay scattered across the maintenance bay in various states of injury and consciousness. Thane remained on his knees, struggling to breathe through the aftermath of respiratory paralysis. Doom sat against the bulkhead with a dazed expression and what appeared to be a severe concussion. The Altarian twins presented a study in contrasts, with Crix completely unconscious and Vox slowly regaining his senses, but unable to stand without assistance. Reyes had the worst injuries, with facial trauma from his encounter with the tool rack that would require reconstructive surgery. Flux and Nord were conscious but showing signs of internal injuries from their meeting with the bulkhead. All 7 would require extended medical treatment and psychological counseling. In the center of this scene of destruction stood Alex Reed, completely uninjured and calmly providing first aid to his attackers. His uniform was barely wrinkled, his breathing was steady, and his hands were gentle as he checked vital signs and positioned the wounded for optimal medical care. The contrast between his condition and that of his opponents was stark and unmistakable. Security Chief Commander Rex arrived with the medical teams, his experienced eyes taking in the scene with professional assessment. As a veteran of 3 galactic conflicts, he had seen the aftermath of many fights, but this was something unprecedented in his experience. 7 trained military cadets had been systematically disabled by a single opponent in what appeared to be a matter of seconds. Alex provided a clear and factual report of the incident, beginning with the message that had summoned him to the maintenance bay and ending with his decision to defend himself when attacked. He made no excuses and offered no justifications beyond the simple fact that he had been outnumbered 7-1 by individuals who had made their violent intentions clear. The investigation that followed was thorough and revealing. Academy Security reviewed weeks of surveillance footage, interviewed dozens of witnesses, and compiled a detailed timeline of harassment and escalation that painted a clear picture of systematic bullying. The evidence showed that Alex had been the victim of a coordinated campaign designed to force him out of the academy through intimidation and violence. Medical examination of the 7 attackers confirmed that all injuries were consistent with defensive force applied by someone with extensive martial arts training. More importantly, the precision of the strikes showed that Alex had deliberately avoided causing permanent damage or life-threatening trauma. Every blow had been calculated to disable rather than destroy, demonstrating remarkable control under extreme pressure. The Academy's disciplinary board faced an unusual situation. Standard protocol called for severe punishment of any cadet involved in unauthorized violence, but the evidence clearly showed that Alex had been defending himself against multiple attackers who had planned the confrontation specifically to cause him harm. More complicated was the fact that his response had been both overwhelmingly effective and remarkably restrained. Commandant Ilarius convened a special hearing to address the incident and its implications. The elderly Altarian had commanded multi-species forces for decades and understood both the legal requirements and the practical realities of military discipline. His decision would set a precedent that would affect human-alien relations throughout the Academy. The hearing room was packed with cadets from every species, all eager to learn the official response to what was already being called the Maintenance Bay Incident. Rumors had spread throughout the station, growing more dramatic with each retelling. Some claimed that Alex had killed all 7 attackers. Others insisted that he had used hidden weapons or combat drugs to enhance his abilities. The truth, as Commandant Ilarius explained to the assembly, was both simpler and more complex than the rumors suggested. Alex had indeed defeated 7 attackers in approximately 7 seconds using nothing but his natural abilities and his training. He had done so while exercising remarkable restraint and demonstrating the kind of tactical thinking that the Academy was designed to develop. Rather than facing discipline, Alex received official commendation for his conduct both before and during the incident. His months of patience in the face of harassment showed the kind of character that made good officers. His precise application of defensive force showed the kind of skill that made good soldiers. His immediate shift to providing medical aid showed the kind of compassion that made good leaders. The 7 attackers faced a different fate. Their coordinated bullying campaign violated multiple Academy regulations and demonstrated exactly the kind of behavior that had no place in a military organization designed to protect civilian populations. All 7 were expelled from the Academy and banned from future service in the Galactic Defense Force. The incident became a watershed moment for human-alien relations at the Academy. Before the Maintenance Bay incident, humans were viewed with a mixture of curiosity and caution based on their planet's reputation. After seeing what one human could do when properly motivated, that caution evolved into genuine respect. Cadets who had previously dismissed humans as politically correct admissions now understood why Earth's warriors were recruited as elite forces. The same species that could patiently endure weeks of harassment without retaliation could also disable 7 opponents in 7 seconds when the situation demanded it. This combination of restraint and capability made humans uniquely valuable as peacekeepers and special operations personnel. Alex found himself reluctantly famous throughout the Academy, but he used his new status to build bridges rather than intimidate potential enemies. He organized study groups that included cadets from every species, demonstrating that humans were just as interested in cooperation as they were capable of conflict. His example showed that strength without wisdom led to defeat, while wisdom without strength led to victimization. The 7 former bullies recovering in the medical bay before their expulsion experienced their own form of education. Facing a true predator had fundamentally changed their understanding of power and hierarchy. Thane, his breathing finally restored to normal, found himself unable to sleep as he replayed those 7 seconds over and over in his mind. He had thought he understood what strength meant, but Alex had shown him the difference between size and capability. The Altarian twins discovered that their telepathic coordination meant nothing when facing someone who moved faster than their enhanced reaction times could process. Their intellectual superiority had been rendered meaningless by someone who combined intelligence with physical capability in ways they had never imagined possible. The experience left them questioning fundamental assumptions about species hierarchy that they had never thought to examine. Doom learned that his intimidation tactics only worked against beings who could be intimidated. When faced with someone who had grown up dodging predators that would eat him alive, the Tau Cetian's bulk and aggression had been turned against him with surgical precision. The lesson was humbling and complete. Reyes and Flux, the tactical specialists, found their strategic thinking inadequate when facing an opponent who could execute flawless tactics in real time under pressure. Their carefully planned ambush had been dismantled by someone who understood combat theory better than they did and could implement it faster than they could think. Nord discovered that his engineering skills were useless when the problem was not mechanical but personal. All his clever sabotage and cruel pranks had only served to anger something that he should have left alone. The quiet engineer began to understand that intelligence without wisdom was just elaborate stupidity. As word of the incident spread throughout the galactic community, it sparked conversations about human nature and human potential. that had been years in the making. Military commanders who had been skeptical about recruiting from Earth began requesting human transfers for their elite units. Diplomatic corps leaders started including humans in high-risk negotiations where their reputation for controlled violence might prove useful. Back on Earth and its colonies, the story became legend almost overnight. Alex Reed, the farm boy from New Montana who had defended himself against 7 alien bullies and sent them all to the medical bay in 7 seconds, became a symbol of human resilience and capability. Children played games reenacting the maintenance bay incident, while military recruiters found themselves overwhelmed with applications from young people who wanted to follow in Alex's footsteps. The academy itself underwent significant changes in the wake of the incident. New protocols were implemented to prevent bullying before it could escalate to violence. Cross-species training programs were expanded to help cadets understand and respect the capabilities of other species. Most importantly, the incident became a case study in military ethics classes, demonstrating the importance of proportional response and the responsibility that came with superior capability. Alex continued his studies with quiet determination, his academic performance improving as the stress of constant harassment was lifted from his shoulders. His fellow cadets treated him with a respect that was genuine rather than forced, understanding that his restraint was a choice rather than a limitation. When he graduated 2 years later, it was with honors and multiple commendations for leadership and character. His first assignment was to an elite multi-species unit tasked with peacekeeping, operations in disputed territories. The commanding officer specifically requested him based on his academy record, noting that the mission required someone who could fight when necessary, but preferred not to. Alex's reputation had preceded him, and his new teammates understood that they were serving alongside someone who represented the best of what humanity could offer to the galactic community. The lessons of the Maintenance Bay incident continued to resonate throughout Alex's career and beyond. He rose through the ranks based on competence and character, eventually commanding his own multi-species units and earning the respect of beings from dozens of different worlds. His approach to leadership was based on the principle that had guided him through the academy. Strength was meaningless without the wisdom to use it properly. Years later, when Alex had become Colonel Reed and was training the next generation of officers, he would tell his students about a night in Maintenance Bay 7, when 7 bullies learned that picking on someone just because they seemed peaceful was a dangerous mistake. The story always ended the same way, with a reminder that true strength was not about the ability to hurt others, but about the wisdom to know when such ability was necessary and when it was not. The galaxy was a safer place because it contained beings who could fight like demons when necessary, but chose to live like angels whenever possible. Alex Reed had proven that humans belonged among the stars, not because they were the most violent species, but because they were perhaps the only species that could combine maximum capability with maximum restraint. In a universe full of potential conflicts, that combination made them invaluable as both warriors and peacemakers. The farm boy from New Montana had grown up to become exactly what the galaxy needed: someone strong enough to protect the innocent and wise enough to know the difference between justice and revenge. The 7 seconds in Maintenance Bay 7 had demonstrated human capability, but the decades that followed demonstrated human character. Both lessons were equally important, and both would be remembered long after the participants had passed into history.